Okay, we are recording. Chris, how are you doing today?
Very well, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay, thank you. I'm okay. Where are you today? Where's home?
I'm in Glasgow, a little place called Clydebank, which is just outside Glasgow. A little shipbuilding town. Used to be, now it's a commuter town, but yeah.
Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Well, we'll get back to the formative years and home and stuff throughout this chat, I'm sure, many times. Ahead of that, I just want to cast your mind back maybe over the last 2 years, and just to kind of get a little snapshot of how you found those 2 years, both as Chris Reilly person, human being, and creatively.
Difficult. In the first year, I worked zero in 11 months. I just bought a house. I had a mortgage to take care of. And as a self-employed person, I had 11 months with no money coming in and very few options to make money. I kept myself busy. I did a podcast of my own and aimed at actors who wanted to be actors and trying to kind of keep creative in that respect. But other than that, I just looked after my niece and schooled her. I set up a little school in the back of the house and we did that during lockdown. The second year, I was lucky enough to get a project called Slow Horses, which is for Apple TV, and I started that in February 21. And so we then embarked on trying to film 2 seasons of that with the restrictions, which in itself was pretty hard because you'd have to create bubbles and they would have to send a car and they'd have to have a driver stay overnight and then pick me up in the morning and then drive me all the way from Scotland down to London and arrive on set and be tested again and all these other things. And we tried a number of ways of doing that, but it was pretty difficult. And also my mum got sick, and so I moved house, and I've actually built her a house right there at the bottom of the garden. And I had to do it myself really, because getting labour and getting tradesmen and getting materials. So I built a house. I gave myself a hernia.
Did you actually give yourself a hernia?
I actually did.
Oh shit!
I was drinking a can of Fanta and it just popped out, and I'm like, what's that? And I'm like, glug, 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 glug. So I phoned the doctor and described, and they said, no, that's a hernia, mate. And I said, right, okay, well, get me in and get it done. And so I went and got it fixed. And mum's a unique human being, and so she, like, it was an open surgery. It wasn't keyhole or anything, and stitches and stuff. And the next day after I got my stitches, Mum says, "Oh, there's stuff needing cleaned up in the garden. Surely you could just lift some light things."
Get on with it, man. Come on.
You couldn't write it. You couldn't write it, mate.
Lovely. Well, look, let's start your playlist. And for track 1, I'm going to ask you, please, Chris, to tell me the song with the greatest ever intro.
Money for Nothing, Dire Straits.
You said that very confidently. Was there anyone else in the running for that, or was it straight to that?
No, straight to that. The album actually reminds me of, no, he's not an uncle, he's my dad's friend. So the album reminds me of my uncle. He loves it, and so it came instantly to mind. Maybe not the long one, maybe the radio edit is just enough for most people. But yeah, I think it's perfect.
See, I think the full version, the full wanky bit with Sting doing all of that, I think that's all right, but it makes it, when it drops, all the better. It's the calm before the storm, and it builds you up, and then I think you get the payoff then. I mean, it is a riff beyond riffs anyway, but I think just with that little bit of like atmospheric warbling and whatnot, I think it just makes it that much better when it does come.
Aye. For me, when the drums come in, when they start to it's coming. But I think I was timing it. I think it's 2 minutes and 6 seconds before you even hear Martin Oliver.
How long it is?
I think it is on the full one. So it's kind of mad. You'd never get to play it on the radio in that way. So they cut it for the radio, but I love it.
That's one of the things that's just, it comes up time and time again when I speak to musicians on this podcast, that people will choose tracks such as Money for Nothing and Bohemian Rhapsody and these iconic, like I think alongside Thriller, I think Brothers in Arms was probably one of the biggest selling records of the 80s, 100%, if not of all time. It was a monster selling record, wasn't it?
Aye.
And the thought that that was a single. I think, and obviously the video was so iconic as well. I think it was just as MTV was launched, wasn't it? And then that video was so state of the
The
art, wasn't
neon
it?
and the it was mad. And the bandanas.
Yeah, of course. And like, what's weird is, like, I always remember like looking at Dire Straits and thinking, like, because I'm 48, so I reckon in the 80s, what was I like? I guess in my early teens. And I remember like looking at Dire Straits and thinking, God, they're like granddads. And like, but I think when you look at how old they were when that came out, they were in their 20s.
Aye.
And it just seems crazy because I just think like they were forever old men, Dire Straits. Do you know what I mean? But like you think they were in the prime of their life, rocking it. But like I remember just thinking, oh yeah, my dad likes them. Like they all look a bit old as well, but they weren't. It's but then again, you look at the music of that time compared to now, and you think the biggest pop stars in the world would have been Dire Straits, Phil Collins, Eric Clapton. And these were, were all kind of, I guess, middle-aged men, a lot of them, and you wouldn't get that now. I just don't think. I don't know. I suppose Robbie Williams is a middle-aged man now. Maybe. I don't know.
It is a kind of dying breed. The music is the type of music that kids listen to now has changed. But I mean, I used to work in a pub in Highgate called the Boogaloo, and I used to do
Boogaloo radio there.
Did you?
Yeah.
So Jerry.
Yeah.
I mean, as hard to know as Jerry is, I would consider him a friend now. He's done so many favors for me. In fact, I did a photo shoot for some publicity I've got going, and he just handed me the keys to his pub. How generous is that? Just there you go. There's the keys. I've got another meeting, Chris. Crack on. So Jerry's a lovely man. But no, I mean, the songs that people used to love there, even on a Friday and Saturday night, were Fleetwood Mac and Dire Straits and all that kind of, that generation, that late 80s stuff. So there's got to be something in that, isn't there?
Yeah, good songs are good songs. I just think what we have lost now is new bands being able to go to a record label with a Money for Nothing or a Bohemian Rhapsody.
Aye.
They'd get laughed at the building now. They're like, you can't have a 2.5 minute intro.
I know.
Like, kids are on TikTok. They want the song done and dusted in a minute.
We've lost the album, though, haven't we? Really, we've lost the album in a lot of ways.
100%. And again, that album culture is something that does come up on here. And it's when you think of Brothers in Arms as a prime example, and and whether you want to look at any of like Tusk or Tango in the Night or any sort of epic records by these artists, they would have spent hours and days meticulously like putting that. How's this album going to work? What track we're going to put where? And on that track listing. And now they just cherry pick the track off of iTunes, and you never hear it as a body of work. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly, because one track to the next, you can't drop the ball. You've got to try and create a different mood or a thing like. And there are there's from that era. There's just some awesome albums. Like I've got one track. I won't say it, but there's there's a couple of awesome albums from awesome albums coming up. But you said about the generational thing. This album, the music of Dire Straits really connects me to my dad's generation. And it's that transition when you become an adult and your dad's friends sometimes become your own friends.
Yeah.
That's connected me to them because we like the same music,
Yeah.
And so my dad's friends that are now my friends in the same way, we connect in a way through those memories. And they remember me as a little snotty kid, but somehow I get to be in the squad because I actually like the same music.
Love it. Right, well, let's do track 2. I'm going to ask you, please, to tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please, Chris.
This is a real downer. This is one of those ones where it sinks the mood. The second track in the album should never be like this, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. It's When I See You Again from Fleetwood Mac, from the Tango in the Night album. And that album was an album that my dad had bought just after he'd split up with my mother. And I wasn't allowed to see my mother for whatever reason. And so my dad brought us up, but I just remember being so tragically pining for my mum, and the situation she was in and how difficult things were for her at the time, that the little I knew at that age, at
How old was you, Chris?
Oh, right. Yeah, I was 10 or 11, and I just remember bawling and crying when I would hear it or I would listen to it, and it was a real difficult time. But the actual album I love, and there was like so many other tracks. Because my dad would just play an album. You would sit in the car with your dad, and it would be a tape, so it would be an album you'd play, unless it was one of the now ones or something. So it was this album. It was a toss up between this album and the Faith album. And me and my dad used to listen to. So this one got it because it was so emotional.
I've recorded about 6 podcasts this week, and on this question, all 6 of you have referenced being in a car with your parents, like for this point. It's amazing, like that so many formative memories are being in a car with your parents, to being exposed to that music. And like, I don't know if that's still a thing. I hope so, and because it presents itself constantly that people pick a track and then they go, yeah, it was like, I remember like we'd have to commute to here, or on family holidays, my dad had always put this album on, and this was the song. And it's crazy, like how songs like that just resonate and stick in your mind, and you can always picture it as well. It's just like, yeah, I can picture I was in a car with my dad. Like, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. If a song's going to cut through you with a situation it was in, which sounds a crazy situation for a 10-year-old boy to try and have to sort of process. Oh my God. I mean, that song is different level beautiful as, anyway. And to kind of be making sense of that at such a young age as well. That's heavy, man.
But Mum lives with me now. Mum's out the back. She's right there. Making my life hell. But no, in a car, I suppose it's one of the few circumstances where silence is acceptable, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're both in that place of collective reflection, especially when conversation is difficult about a difficult subject or whatever. And sometimes a song will come up that just says it all. And that's what stays with you, definitely.
I mean, aside from being out and about in the car, like, was it a musical house? Was the radio on at home growing up, or?
Not with my father. My father actually, I love my dad and we got on great now, but my dad actually made you feel very foolish about liking music, which for somebody who's gone into the creative industries is a kind of weird thing. But I always listened to my music on my headphones because my dad would always have some derogatory comment about the particular artist that I was listening to. And I don't know why that is, because he loves music himself, and all the albums he chooses are probably the same ones that I would choose. But he would always say something off the cuff, and oh, you're not listening to that, that whatever, and you're like, oh, aye, I love it.
I guess your parents aren't meant to like what you like. I guess, I don't know. I think that it was definitely the case for me as well. I remember like my dad often walking past my room and just going, what's this shit? And it was like, I'd be like, hey, this is well good. And it was like, oh, shit. And it was like, and it kind of like, it hurts you a bit, doesn't it? Because you just think like, but I think in retrospect, I don't know, maybe it's just every kid's rebelling and it's a bit punk and maybe it's just your parents feeling a bit old.
Aye, well, maybe it is, but the way music makes you feel good and you get your strut on and you're like, da, 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 and then all of a sudden your dad will come along and kick the legs away from you and say, what are you listening to that garbage for? And you're like, oh, that defines me. That's what I am.
Brilliant.
Aye.
Brilliant. I mean, no, do you know what? We'll get onto that a little bit later. I always ask guests as well what that emotion was attached to that that memory and that song, but obviously it's going to be one. It's quite self-explanatory. It's definitely
pining.
One of
pining. I suppose it was. I didn't really. I knew everything about what was happening, and I knew why I couldn't, be with her. But it really, really stung. It really hurt, and also there was a lot of worry going on in my mind about how, if I could do anything, and if because she was in such a difficult place, and I really, it's just the feeling of being absolutely incapable of doing anything.
Yeah.
When you are as a kid, you're not capable, but you wish you were. You'd have dreams of being Superman or something and being able to fly in and fix things, and you can't.
Yeah. For track 3, I'm going to ask you for the song that reminds you of your time at school, please, Chris.
It's Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster by the Ghetto Boys.
Tell me about that. And I'll take it school was Glasgow, yeah?
School was Glasgow.
Okay.
I went to and I can't really recall the type of music I might be into in primary school. In the early years of secondary school, I went to an all-boys school, which amalgamated with a girls' school. And then in sixth year, I went to the school that was back in my mother's place. So I moved away down to Alexandria, which is only about 20 miles away from Clydebank. But I moved back with my mother and I went to another school in sixth year. And I had to make a whole new group of friends, people that I vaguely remember, some of them from primary school. And so I had to be kind of accepted again. And all they listened to in the common room was gangster rap. I mean, the girls would obviously fight for something else, but the boys were just into gangster rap. And I'd never really heard any of this stuff before. And I actually really, really liked it. So that's kind of what we listened to, was gangster rap. And there was a whole load of tracks that could have been up there, but I thought, nothing says it like this particular track.
Absolutely. Did you enjoy school?
I did enjoy school because school was validation for me. I was prodigious. I was very good at school. I was a bit of a prodigy, and I'd get the highest marks at everything, and then be, teachers would want me to take their classes until I hit the age of 16, where because of my experiences at home, I decided that I was in charge and I was an adult, and that they'd no business speaking to my parents about anything to do with me. And I remember telling teachers to fuck right off at that point, because it was one teacher in particular who wouldn't let me go to a university open day because I'd missed the cut. And I'd missed it because of some real deep personal issue. And some of the teachers got it and really helped me. And I'm still friends with them, friends with my old teachers. But some of the teachers didn't, and they just came down in a way that seemed to me to be unnecessarily abrupt. And so I just told them to get fucked. And so I would do things that I remember just kicking a ball through a window once, then getting into the class and asking for it back. I just thought, fuckies. So I didn't rebel. I kind of just decided that I'd had enough of their shit. So that was so I loved school, but in the end, school hated me.
Was you confident?
No, I was confident in myself. I was confident that I was small. I was very small. I was no sort of fighter. But in my, in the Glaswegian masculine culture, that's, I suppose, highly regarded. But I always was good friends with the boys that were, and I never really got difficulty in that respect. But I wasn't, I was confident enough, but I still had those. School wasn't my main thing. My main thing was outside of school. I had other shit going on, so I just I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't. I wouldn't say I was confident now.
What did you want to be when you was at school?
Scientist or an artist. I actually wanted to go to art school. I'll do something with that, and then I never wanted to be an actor. But I was pretty good at science, and I loved physics and chemistry and all that sort of thing. So I went to Strathclyde Uni and did applied physics. And I get the same sort of problem there. So I fucked that off and went to Leipzig and pretended to be a builder. I pretended to be a joiner. I built a convent, and then various different jobs and all the rest of it. But That is some
pinball from applied physics to going to go and jump on a building site and see how that goes.
So worked every night after school from the age of 15. Went to uni and didn't like it very much. Left after year 2. Went to Leipzig, built a convent, pretended to be a joiner. Then I worked on the roads and railways. Where, if your name's Reilly, you can get a job with the paddies, no problem. And so I would work on the roads and the railways and just do that for a while. Drifted for a bit. Bumped into a great boss. He put me in touch with his company, and they hired me as a recruitment consultant. Did that for a while. Then I went into business development, and then I returned to the homeless unit that I grew up in, and I changed that into a housing support service, and I ran that for a few years. Then I ran children's homes. Then I became an actor.
Fucking hell.
I know.
Throughout all of that journey, I don't want to sort of just, you know, just skim over that, because that's some journey. You said that you considered art school, art college when you was at school.
Yeah.
When you was doing all of these things in business and setting up, you know, what you were setting up, what was your creative outlet? Because obviously there must have been something there, because you found it now, but throughout all of them years, like, you know, what was your outlet creatively?
Drawing and painting. I totally agree with you. Everybody needs a creative outlet, and I was so fortunate to have it, because it's what got me through. But when I found, and I never knew I wanted to be an actor, but when I found acting, just doing drama, doing musicals with the local amateur dramatics society while I was running the homeless unit, that hobby then became my profession over the course of a number of years. But yeah, it was mostly drawing and painting.
Wow. So just tell me a little bit about the work that you've done for the homeless, because that sounds pretty remarkable, mate.
So I grew up, when my dad and my mum split up, my dad got a bed and breakfast. That's the business that they had bought. And then they decided to split up after having bought that together. And so he was left with this big building that really wasn't in a place that could leverage a business out of tourism. So he turned it into a kind of halfway house, if you like, taking homeless people who were DSS. So I grew up with all these super interesting characters at very pivotal moments in their life, or either rock bottom or getting out, or like, there's great stories as well as tragic stories. And so I grew up in close contact with all these people from the different circumstances they came from. And then when I left and then come back, it was a family, it was a business, if you like. You know, it wasn't making much money. But I turned it into a housing support service with the, we were going to turn it into a charity, but I ended up, I didn't, because bluntly, it was morally dubious, you know, the way the finances work, with a charity charging X amount for the building and this and that. You make more money as a charity, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. Yeah. But we did good work. We were a housing support service. We created a new sector of service with the Scottish Care Commission called a mixed moist house, which means that we would have people from all different backgrounds with all different sorts of issues who could stay and even fail as long as their issue didn't negatively impact the care plan of anyone else around them. And it worked phenomenally well.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. I'm going to move on to track 4, though. And I'm going to ask you to tell me the first song you remember buying from a record shop, please.
So it was Kings of the Wild Frontier, the album by Adam and the Ants. This is the one with me and the cans in the living room going down. Nice. That's terrible. And I've picked Dog Eat Dog from that, because I just like the kind of the way that it goes. You think it's going to go one way and then it goes another way, you know. And I love that album. Yeah. Stand and Deliver, I don't think is on it, but that was one of the favourite singles. That's the one I used to kind of run around the house, you know, in my dressing gown. But that was the first one.
And I think just the nature of Adam Ant's look. If you're a middle-aged dad, you're not gonna understand it. Like I say, I'm 48, so when I saw Adam Ant on Top of the Pops, I'm sure the same as you did, he was the coolest thing on 2 legs. You know, he looked so cool. I wanted that white stripe across my nose. You know, I wanted the full Adam Ant look. I thought he's how pop stars should look. I think it was such a strong, striking image. And yeah, love him to bits. Absolutely love him. And what a great record as well. Well, did record shops become a sort of an interesting place for you as you sort of, you know, started to sort of get a little older and develop music taste?
Not really. I didn't really have, I mean, I was like 5, I was 6 or 7, I think, when this album comes out. So yeah, I had to ask my parents to get it for me. I didn't really have pocket money per se. I never really got any. I did work. I had a lot of chores to do as a kid. My dad used to have a business called Clean Easy as well, a supplementary business, and I would chase his car around the streets delivering these catalogues. So I don't know if I had a lot of spare time. Yeah. And I didn't, I hung around with friends and stuff like that, but none of us had enough money really to go and buy records.
Yeah.
And so we would take the radio and stuff, and we would do all that. But I never really had the money for record shops. But my dad would occasionally, buy me an album, and he had a load of old albums that I like. He'd a load of Elton John stuff, and various different things. So I kind of got to listen to that. But I never. Record shops weren't a big thing for me. But there was a lovely one in the local area, and you could go in there and mooch around until the guy kicked you out for not buying anything.
Loitering. Well, if record shops weren't your thing, moving on a few years, was clubbing your thing?
Clubbing for me was a way to meet women.
Yeah.
That was what it was. That was my kind of, the.
Do you know what? I'm glad you said that, because so many people come on here and dress it up and talk about why they were going, and ultimately everybody goes there in that's single with the hope of meeting someone, right?
It was a courtship.
Yeah.
And so I was it's not a question you've asked, but I was late when I lost my virginity. I was 19, and which is late for a Scottish young fella, and so I would go along. I would try and get into clubs when I was 17 or 18, but too many people knew my father, so I just couldn't. So 18, 19, 20 was when I was trying, desperately to meet ladies, and I wasn't very successful. But it was just a way. It was just a courtship. It was a way to meet people.
Yeah. And so, what track kind of symbolises your memories of them?
Oh, right. So hold on a minute. It's I Like to Move It by Real to Real. This is a track that was pretty much ruined for me on a stag weekend, because a guy that was on the stag weekend had a McDonald's toy, those little toys you get,
yeah.
And it was and all it does, I like to move it, I like to move it, and that was it. Gave you the 8 bars, and that was it. And he had the microphone at the front of the bus as we travelled to Letterkenny, and he'd put up against it, and it just it was past the point of funny. He did it for 30 minutes. People were throwing things at him. Shut up, stop it. But before that, whenever it came on, and you'd be like, whenever it came on in the club, it was cool, because it was okay to dance to, because it wasn't a particularly, one of those.
Yeah.
That it was a kind of, you could have a laugh, I suppose. So yeah.
You like the dance?
I do. I really do. I love it. I'm terrible, but I do love a wee dance.
Lovely. Well, look, let's take you home for track 6, and I'm going to ask for a favourite song from your home county, please.
This is an odd one, because it's not someone who's in the mainstream, but his music is beautiful, and I would ask anybody to check it out. It's by an artist called Barry James, who lives 10 minutes jog from me, and it's Pretending Not to Breathe, and the timbre in his voice, and the way he constructs lyrics and the way he constructs songs is just mind-blowing. And he had a very famous girlfriend, and I forget her name, and she's a musician, and he contributed significantly to her album, I think. And I don't know why the guy's not famous, because he's just he blows my mind.
How did you discover him?
Through a friend. A friend introduced me to his music, and I actually took that friend with Barry down to the Boogaloo to have him sing a few bits and do a bit of stuff in London. This is a few years ago, but just through a friend. But I mean, his stuff's on. You can access his stuff. You can get it, and I think he's got a lot of traction now. But honestly, you should. It blows my mind. The guy, he's just beautiful.
I checked it today, and yeah, beautiful is a great word to describe what he does. It's absolutely beautiful. And I mean, also just thinking about the sort of late 80s and early 90s, in them formative years, you've not really touched on many other Scottish bands. And when I cast my mind back to that period, and the biggest bands in British pop music, I think at that point, whether it be Deacon Blue, Wet, 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 the Proclaimers, Primal Scream, so many like huge, bands, Hue and Cry, were all coming out of Scotland and dominating the charts. Like, was that something that sort of filtered through to the streets of Glasgow? Just like, look at the musical output that we're sort of throwing out to the world here, because these were like, global selling artists.
We did identify with those guys as being from our world, but we also identified with other people from similar worlds and similar places. You go into any, you went into any Borstal or prison in that era, and you would hear Tracy Chapman, and you'd hear a lot of gangster rap, and you'd hear a lot, so that people would identify with that. You would hear the weirdest songs, and you. From Glasgow, I think we identify more with that kind of working class struggle than we did with anything else. Weirdly, there was things like Neil Diamond and Dr. Hook. You would go to parties, it'd be those guys. You'd hear Eurythmics, you'd hear Jerry Rafferty, you would hear the famous Alex Harvey band, all those guys. But that, that's from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Primal Scream in the 90s really were the guys that you thought, man, they blow us away. That first album, Screamadelica. Even Bobby Gillespie himself says that it's a scrappy album, but it's the best thing. It's a lovely, lovely piece of work.
I don't think any album catches a moment like that record. That definitely captures the 89, 90 perfectly. What was happening culturally, what was happening musically, what was happening just with drugs, with clubs, with everything. That record nails it. Just perfection.
It's really one of the great albums. And you could walk into, I mean, I had a flat when I was before I went back to the homeless unit, I had my own flat, and we had a big poster of Primal Scream on the wall, front and centre. That was the Screamadelica album, it was, we did identify with that, but we had, and you go to any party, you'll definitely hear Deacon Blue, you'll definitely hear Runrig, you'll definitely hear Big Country, you hear all the Scottish people, but we broadened it, I suppose, to anybody who was from we saw as the wrong side of the tracks,
Absolutely. Last track, and you get to play Tastemaker now. And for track 7, I'm going to ask you to tell me a song that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear.
Dr. Hook, More Like the Movies.
Okay, tell me about that.
So it's just from an album that, again, I used to listen to with my dad. And I don't know, just the lyrics strike me as being from a place where somebody's seeing somebody go their own way and they're happy for that, but he's kind of sad that he couldn't make things a bit better for her. And it's not something I identify with personally. I've never felt like that in a relationship or whatever, but it just seems like from a, I don't know, a place of kind of personal tragedy or so. I don't know, but it seems to me like such a, I don't know, it's a song that makes me smile weirdly, and I don't know why it makes me smile. So it's the idea of those lyrics being quite sad, but it's still making me smile. Which I quite like, because there are other songs when I'm working and when I'm acting, sometimes I make up playlists if I need to have an emotional scene or whatever, and it's usually always happy songs that kind of make me cry. I don't know why, but this sad song makes me laugh. I don't know why.
Do you ever kind of, when you get a character, create a playlist of what you think that character would be into and things like that?
All the time.
Really?
All the time. Every time. It's the easiest way of reconnecting with a character. So if you do all this work and research and what you might call the method school, you don't want to, strut around in the character. So you need to find these centers or these anchors or these pathways back to that character. To prepare yourself, and music's the best way to do that. Wow. So I do that. I not only do I do playlists for the character, but I also make mixtapes for the other people. What mixtape would I send him? What mixtape would I send her? And I made the mistake very early on in my career of letting somebody see behind the curtain. And I had this romantic scene with this girl, and I was a young man myself, and I said, do you want to hear the mixtape I made you? And it was the stickiest, ickiest, horriblest moment. So I don't ever tell anybody about it now. I don't give them, the anchors or the pathways, whether it be an object. I don't give that anymore, because it's my thing. They don't resonate with it, but I do it for, it's one of the first things I do.
Wonderful. Well, we put together our own little mixtape for this podcast with all the songs that you've picked and some of the others that we've chatted about throughout this natter, and we put that up on Spotify so people can go and check out all of those songs. 2022's fastly gathering pace, and it's looking like a far more positive and connected world than the previous 2 years. And so I'm going to ask you with that in mind, what you're looking forward to personally and what's going to be happening professionally.
Well, professionally, I'm going to Kosovo in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to make a film out there, and then I come back, and then I go to LA to meet my. I've got some American people that I need to meet about some stuff, and then I hopefully start back on the Apple job if it goes again pretty soon after that. And then hope to just fit in as much as I can. I'm reading an audio book next week. One of the big books of big Scottish books of last year. This is the sequel that's coming up. I can't say what it is, but I'm going to go and read that, which is kind of culturally important to me. And I've started a little production company as well with a couple of fantastic writers. And we have like 3 projects already that people are really enthusiastic about and have picked up and have given us some money for. So professionally, things are going really well.
Wonderful.
Personally, I want to try and finish the house. I want to try and get out to see my dad a little bit more than I do. And I don't know. I just want to make my mum happy because she's always on my back these days for, the garden needing done or this needing done or whatever.
Well, sitting around with your feet up with a hernia ain't going to get that garden finished, mate.
She's mental.
Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure getting a chat records with you, mate. I really appreciate your time today, and I wish you all the best, mate. I've
enjoyed this so much. Thanks very much.
Oh, absolute pleasure, mate. I'm going to press stop now on here.